We saw right there President Trump holding a bilateral meeting with South Africa's president, the two hashing out possible trade deals, as well as a range of geopolitical issues, including the white Afrikaner farmers brought to the U.S. as refugees by the Trump administration. Elon Musk, who is originally from South Africa, taking part in today's meetings. Now, last week, 59 white South Africans arrived in the U.S. after getting refugee status. It's something the Trump administration had previously paused for other nationalities. Let's bring in correspondent Robert Sherman, who's live for us there outside of the White House. And Robert, a lot happening in that more than hour long. And this was supposed to really be the precursor to the private meeting. And President Trump showed what he says is proof of genocide there in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, what you saw there, Nichole, with your own eyes is two world leaders came into this meeting wanting to talk about very different subject matters. For the South African delegation, they came in with the narrow focus, wanted to talk about trade and tariffs and the impact that it can have on their country, which they believe will help bolster economic mobility for people in South Africa, potentially bringing the rampant crime problem that they have in their country down due to bolstering economic abilities for everyday South Africans. But then you heard President Trump, who remained rather laser focused throughout that bilateral meeting, in which he said that he wanted to talk about the issue of South African white farmers, known as Afrikaners, and violence, that has been carried out against them, something that there was acknowledgement of. Although you have heard from the South African leadership saying in the past that they believe that this is something that has not resulted in anything to the caliber of a genocide, but there was acknowledgement that there is an issue of violence there. President Trump putting the South African president on the spot at certain times, saying that he doesn't necessarily want to move forward with any broader visions or agreements until dealing with this issue here. This is what President Trump said in the Oval a short while ago. Take a listen.
We do have a lot of people are very concerned with regard to South Africa, and that's really the purpose of the meeting, and we'll see how that turns out. But we have many people that feel they're being persecuted, and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on.
Now, you have in the past seen the United States backing down financial aid going to South Africa as a result of all of this. And the president has contended that there's genocide taking place in South Africa. Courts inside of South Africa itself attempted to throw cold water on that, saying that those claims aren't true. And that's what South Africa's president tried to say as well here in the Oval Office. Here's his comments. Take a listen.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it'll take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective.
So you hear President Ramaphosa talking there about that if there was genocide taking place in South Africa, you wouldn't be seeing the likes of Ernie Els, a golf legend, Retief Goosen on the PGA Tour, as well as the other members of that delegation there in the Oval Office today. But that being said, President Trump playing a video inside of the Oval Office, which showed comments being made by political leaders in South Africa of different parties, calling for violence in South Africa in rather explicit terms. The South Africans tried to remove themselves from those comments, saying that they belong to people of smaller parties and that they are in opposition to any of those comments. But you have the president there saying is that there is a violence problem in South Africa and believes that there is a racially motivated violence problem in South Africa that he says he wants to see rectified before moving forward with broader agreements here.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.